Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to break down a modern React state management library called React State Custom, or RSC for short. It makes a big promise to take the simple patterns you already know and love, React hooks, and scale them up for global state, all while seriously boosting performance.
So let's kick things off by talking about a problem that, let's be honest, nearly every React developer has run into. As your app starts to grow, sharing state can get messy, really fast.
Yeah, you've probably felt this pain. It starts with prop drilling, which is just tedious. Then you're manually wrapping everything in these complex provider trees. And maybe the worst part, those unnecessary re-renders. One tiny piece of data changes, and suddenly a whole bunch of components that don't even care about that data are re-rendering anyway. It's a performance killer, and frankly, a lot of work to manage.
So take a look at this. This should look pretty familiar to anyone who's used React's context API. For just a simple counter, you've got all this code. The context, the provider component, the custom hook to use it. It's a ton of boilerplate, right? And the big kicker is that every single component that calls useCounter is going to re-render every time that count changes. It just doesn't scale.
All right, so that's the problem. And this is exactly where React State Custom comes into the picture. It's a solution designed from the ground up to fix these issues by really embracing what makes React great: hooks.
I mean, the whole philosophy is right there in that quote. The goal is to get rid of the boilerplate, dish the complexity, and just give you clean, high-performance state management. It's all about using the tools you already know, like useState and useEffect, but for your global state.
And getting up and running is, well, surprisingly easy. Seriously, it's just a few steps. You write your logic in a plain old React hook, just like you always would. You create a shared store with one function call. You drop this one component, AutoRootCtx, at the root of your app, and boom, you can now use that state hook anywhere you want.
And this slide really just drives the point home. On the left, you've got that mountain of code for the manual context setup. On the right, with React State Custom, it's just the hook with your state logic and a single line to make it global. All that other stuff, it just vanishes.
So the big question is, how? How does it pull this off? How can something so simple on the outside still deliver such great performance? Let's pop the hood and see what's really going on. Okay, so here's the secret sauce. Underneath it all, it's not really using React's context to pass data around. Instead, each store acts like a classic pub subsystem. When a piece of state changes, the store publishes an event. Your components don't listen to the whole store. They subscribe only to the specific events for the data they actually care about.
And you might be wondering, wait, what about all those provider components I had to wrap everything in? Well, that AutoRootCtx component we mentioned, it handles all of that for you, automatically. It spins up state instances when a component needs them, and, this is super important, it tears them down and cleans up the memory when they're not being used anymore. No more memory leaks from forgotten state.
This right here, this is the magic behind avoiding those wasted renders. The library doesn't give your component the state object directly. It hands you a special proxy object instead. So when your code accesses something like state.count, that proxy is listening. It says, aha, this component cares about count, and it automatically subscribes you only to updates for that specific property.
So what does that all mean? It's simple. Your component will only re-render if the exact piece of data it's using actually changes. That's huge. If your component just shows a user's name from an auth store, it's not going to re-render when the loading status flips. You get this optimization for free without writing a single extra line of code.
Okay, so we know how it works now, but how does it actually stack up against the big names in the game? Let's put RS head-to-head with giants like Redux and the minimalist favorite, useState.
This table gives us a really nice at-a-glance view. You can see RSC really shines with Zero Boilerplate and those selective re-renders built right in. That puts it in a similar camp to useState in terms of simplicity, but it's a very different beast from the heavy setup of Redux or the performance traps of plain context.
Now, what about bundle size? It's kind of a Goldilocks situation here. At around 10 kilobytes, it's way leaner than Redux Toolkit, but it's not trying to win the race against useState, which is famously tiny at just 1 kilobyte. That extra size is the trade-off for getting those more advanced features, like automatic context management.
When you look at the philosophy, it's like night and day compared to Redux. Redux is all about that strict, predictable architecture with actions, reducers, and middleware. And that's amazing for things like time travel debugging. RSC, on the other hand, just says, hey, you know React hooks? Let's just use those for everything. It embraces the patterns you already know.
And what about useState? The key difference really comes down to structure and lifecycle.
useState gives you the super minimal global store that actually lives outside of React's component tree. RSC, however, uses context under the hood to create state that's scoped and, crucially, automatically cleaned up. For apps where features and their state come and go, that automatic cleanup can be a total game changer.
Okay, this brings us to the most important question of all, right? Based on everything we've seen, when should you actually reach for React State Custom in your next project?
Well, you should for sure give it a look if you're someone who loves writing React hooks and wants your global state to feel exactly the same. It's a fantastic choice if you need that high-performance, fine-grained rendering right out of the box, without any fuss. And if you need multiple, independent versions of the same state logic or value that automatic memory cleanup, it's a really strong contender.
But, it's not a silver bullet. If your team lives and breathes by the Redux dev tools and time travel debugging is non-negotiable, then Redux is probably still your answer. If you need the absolute tiniest bundle size you can get, Zustand is almost impossible to beat. And of course, if you really value a massive community and a huge third-party ecosystem, the big players still have that advantage.
So in the end, React State Custom makes a pretty compelling argument. It suggests that maybe the best tools for managing state in React are, well, the tools React already gave us. By building on those primitives, it delivers something that's powerful, performant, and just feels natural to use. Which kind of leaves us with a final thought to chew on. Maybe the future of state management really is just writing more React.